Guess what I finished? Lockdown, book one of the Escape from Furnace series by Alexander Gordon Smith. So I ended up finishing this book on a Saturday night, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll just go get it tomorrow. Then I realized that the library is closed on Sundays. So I have to wait till Monday to go get it. This book is about a kid named Alex. He's 14 years old. Alex isn't your typical main character. Like, at the beginning, he doesn't seem like a bad person, but you know he's not a good person either. He is a thief. He breaks into people's houses and steals things. He's compelled by his greed, and even though he knows of Furnace, he doesn't think he'll ever end up there. Even if he gets caught, he doesn't think he could ever end up in Furnace, because that's where you think of like really bad people being. And even though he is a thief, he doesn't consider himself like a really horrible person, but he doesn't think of the consequences when he's robbing these houses. But of course there's a no tolerance policy for children anymore since the Summer of Slaughter, so even if he was only caught just being a thief, like, he would still end up in Furnace. He just didn't think that way. He didn't think he'd ever get caught. But obviously, things don't go his way. He doesn't even get sent down to Furnace because of being a thief. It's for being a murderer. And he didn't even do it. One time when him and his friend Toby are robbing a house, it goes wrong, and these guys in these black suits, who he doesn't know who they are, they come and they shoot his best friend and then frame him for the murder. And he ends up going to this Furnace penitentiary, which is basically a really tough prison for all kind of juvenile offenders, because there was what they call the Summer of Slaughter, where a bunch of like teenagers like went out on like a killing spree, and we don't exactly know what happened, but after that there was a law put into effect that any childhood crimes, they automatically get sent to Furnace, and it's a life sentence, and there's no possibility of parole. So Lockdown, the first book, is about Alex's struggle with being sent down to Furnace, him trying to figure out why he was framed, and him trying to figure out a way out, because he doesn't want to stay there his entire life when he knows that he didn't commit the crime. Okay, so this book, I really loved it from the beginning. I really enjoyed the first chapter. It really did a good job of like pulling you into the story and kind of getting a feel for it, and still not quite sure what's going on though. If I stopped running, I was dead. That just pulls you in because you're like, why? Are you running from something really evil? What's chasing you? And I also like how the first chapter is kind of like a jump forward. You know, the entire rest of the book, like at least halfway through, is all kind of him reflecting on what already happened and leading up to the first chapter, even though you're not exactly sure where the first chapter is in the book. I also like that he can pinpoint the exact time that he screwed his life up, and this was when he was 12. He knows how to find a good escape route if he ever gets caught, so that he can get away fast enough that he won't be arrested. And right off the bat, even in the first couple chapters, you can tell he's headed for a not so great ending, even though you know obviously he's going to end up in Furnace because he's trying to escape. That's what the book series is. But at the beginning he knew something was going to happen. He says, all those dark, horrible feelings I'd buried were still there. I could feel them turning and growing somewhere inside of me. Deep down I knew I was heading for a fall, one that I'd never be able to pick myself up from. And as in all good crime movies, that fall came with one last job. And this last house is where he gets caught. But it's not by the police like he thinks, it's by these creepy dudes in like black suits, and they can all move really fast, and they're all really creepy and very muscular, and they all look very identical, but one has a mole on his face, and that's how he's able to distinguish between some of them. And the one with the mole on his face shoots his friend Toby, and then they throw the gun at him, and automatically he catches it just on instinct, which of course is the worst thing you could possibly do, because now your prints are on the gun and they tell him to run. So obviously he runs because he's terrified. They just shot his best friend, and so he runs away, and he eventually gets caught by the police as he's running home. Okay, so Alex's trial, after being accused of murdering Toby, is this not weird to anybody else? Like, he talks about him being locked in a cage. I have never heard of this happening before. Sure, in books, you know, but that never happens in real life, so I'm wondering if that's because of the Summer of Slaughter, that they've just kind of upgraded to putting people in cages as they put them on trial. I don't know. And even though I hate him, I love how the judge is so sassy at this part. The black suits walk in during his trial. These men are representatives from Furnace Penitentiary. Is this what your defense has come to, accusing anybody of your crimes? Was I there? Did I have a disagreement with your accomplice and pull the trigger too? And he also talks about how it only took the jury 40 minutes to decide that he was guilty. So obviously you know that they weren't really believing his story and they weren't taking it into account when they made their decision. They had already pegged him as a murderer when he walked in, because they've been fed up with kids now and they just see them all as murderers rather than children. And this prison is pretty scary. Everybody sees him already as a criminal. Everybody thinks that all criminal children should be sent to Furnace, and basically they forget about him. And I like how one of the guys says, "There's no one you can cry to, no one you can beg to. The public have judged you and found you guilty. As far as they are concerned, you are already dead. If you try to escape, you'll be killed. They don't care if you die. It's just a matter of time before you die, and when and where isn't exactly set in stone. You can die at any time." The elevator going down to Furnace is creepy as hell. Like, I don't like elevators that much. Like, I still take them and I'm not like terrified to use them. But when I was reading this part, it was really creepy to me, because just like the thought of going an entire mile down just in this elevator, not being able to see where you are, you know, just knowing that you're going to be that far underground and having no way to stop it. Also in the elevator you meet Z, who kind of becomes Alex's best friend besides Donovan, his roommate. But Z and Alex are put into Furnace at the same point, and you also meet Jimmy and Monty in the elevator as well. You find out that all four of them have been framed for murder. You get a feeling that Furnace isn't completely filled with all these criminals. That's a really scary concept. Being sentenced to live your entire life in a prison and no possibility of parole is like one of the worst fates I can think of. At one point it says, "The noise of the elevator shifted pitch, and with the bone-breaking shudder, it came to a halt. Before the doors could open, however, there was one last hate-filled remark from the corner of the cabin. 'We're all going to die in here.'" And kind of ironically, Monty is the first one to actually kind of suffer that fate, because Monty gets taken by the Weezers in the middle of the night at the Bloodlight, and he gets turned into that monster creature type thing, and then he ends up becoming a black suit. You first get your introduction of Donovan when Alex gets out of the elevator and the skulls come up to him and kind of tells him that, you know, we run this place, you know, you can't mess with us. And Donovan is Alex's roommate, and he acts like this tough guy, and Alex is kind of nervous, and then come to find out that it's just kind of a show. He's learned how Furnace works, and if you show weakness, you're going to get picked on. So he's been there a long time. He was actually one of the first to be put in Furnace. And you also learn that Donovan is actually guilty of his crimes. The warden is another odd thing about this place. He has like this really stretched skin across his face, like really bony, and he has this really odd look to him, and nobody can look him in the eye, and nobody knows why. Alex gets a lot of insight to how the prison works because of Donovan, because he's been there for so long. Donovan kind of shows him the ropes, and Alex kind of throws it back in his face a little bit. Without really meaning to, he appreciates Donovan telling him everything, and he wants to know more, but he doesn't exactly follow his advice. One instance is when they're in the cafeteria type room when the skulls are picking on Monty, and Donovan's like, you know, they need a scapegoat. If they don't pick on Monty, they don't have a scapegoat, then everybody's in trouble. Alex has an obvious struggle of whether or not to do the right thing. Furnace is a place where you can't exactly always do the right thing. You have to do what is going to help you to survive. Every fiber of my body wanted to step in and help, and every fiber of my body wanted to stay on that bench and forget it was happening. I thought that any minute I'd literally be torn in two, reduced to a quivering bloody mess on the canteen floor. So he's torn between helping, because that's what he wants to do, and just keeping his ground, just staying there, doing nothing about it, because he knows that if he does interfere, shit's gonna go down and it's gonna be really bad for him. He used to be that kind of bully. He picked on the kids at school. He was the thief. He wasn't exactly the best person in the world. And he sees himself in the schools, and something inside of him goes, this is not right. So he decides to help out Monty, and he jumps over the thing and starts beating up the skulls, and they're about to basically kill him, and Z helps them out, and then they escape, but then they experience another lockdown, and they take off running, and they don't make it before all the cell doors close. And this is kind of where you see that Donovan isn't actually that hard ass that he kind of pretends to be. He tells you that, you know, there are no friends in Furnace, you can't have attachments because everybody's going to die eventually, whether they be taken or they be mauled by these killer monsters. You see that he actually does care for them because, you know, he jams that, like, toilet seat in the door so that the cell doors don't close so that they can jump in before the big dogs kill them. Basically what the inmates' days consist of is they wake up, after the siren goes off, they get their cells opened, and then they go to hard labor, which can be like working in the laundry room or preparing food or serving it or hacking away at the walls with picks, or cleaning out all the toilets, which sounds like the worst job imaginable. And they eat and they have free time, and then they get locked up again at night. You also kind of learn about the hole, which is basically their solitary confinement type thing down in Furnace, where you're literally stuck in a hole with no food or water or company or anything for a couple days. And Donovan says the longest anybody has ever lasted was 4 days, and they weren't the same person when they came out. And I kind of have a feeling that since the second book is called Solitary, that somehow they get caught and they're put back in Furnace and they all have to go chill out in the hole for a while. And I like that throughout the book it's not based entirely on how he wants to escape, because he's kind of resigned to the fact that he's going to be there for the rest of his life. The way Alex's dreams progress throughout the entire book is really interesting too. Like, it starts out with him being concerned about his family and being locked down in the prison, and at the end of the dream, like, it shows him when he's beating on the glass, like, it's him in the gas mask, so it's almost kind of like a subconscious fear that he is afraid of becoming one of those gas mask peoples, and it kind of foreshadows the ending where, like, Monty becomes this monster and he ends up being a black suit. So obviously they're taking these kids and somehow they're transforming them into these monstrous creatures. Their plan for escape is genius. I thought it was amazing. At first I was wondering how they were going to bring in room 2, because Alex talks about how there's a breeze coming from there and there's fresh air, but then he doesn't talk about it again for another like 5 chapters, and I found that really strange. But eventually you find out that he is interested in it. He tells other people about it. He tells Z and Donovan, and they don't exactly believe him, but he wants to check it out anyway. So he sneaks into room 2 and thinks it's a monster in there, and come to find out it's just water. So their plan of like smuggling in the gas through like the kitchen gloves, I think that is extremely smart. And poor freaking Donovan. I was hoping beyond hope that everybody was going to get out of there perfectly safe and sound, but of course the night before they're going to escape, floodlights come on and they happen to take Donovan. It was pretty freaking heartbreaking, and I was not too happy about it. I really don't like Gary. He just needs to shut up and go away. So at the end, they go ahead and blow up the crack in the hole, and they drop down into the river, and then it just ends. That's it. End of book 1. That's it for this review. I hope you liked it. Subscribe for more reviews, and I will see you guys later. Goodbye, my fellow book nerds.